Okay, cool. Alright, hey everyone, this is Blitz of the Reich. I'm here with my friend Juan Ocampo. He was a sergeant. He's now retired in the U.S. Marine Corps. Sergeant for 6.5 years. He first enlisted in August 2010, went to boot camp, became an aircraft systems technician for 3.5 years, and then became a Marine Corps security guard, specifically for U.S. embassies from January 2014 onward. So just having Juan here. Thanks for being here, Juan.
Thanks for having me.
So your time in the Marine Corps, can you just tell us a little bit about what your job of aircraft specialist technician entailed from the time that you were in boot camp until you were a security guard?
Okay, so when I went to boot camp for a little over 3 months, and then after that, you go to combat training. So boot camp was in Parris Island, South Carolina, and then combat training was in North Carolina, in Camp Geiger. And then afterwards, I went for 6 months in Pensacola, Florida. It's right next to Alabama.
Yeah.
So that's where I learned the basics of electronic maintenance for aircraft. And then afterwards, I went back to North Carolina, but this time in a place called Cherry Point, which is another Marine base. And for there, I was there for 2 months, learning the specific aircraft and how to read the manuals and things like that. And it was for the aircraft, the AV-8B Harrier.
Okay, yeah. Isn't that a ground attack aircraft?
Yeah, it's for the most part ground attack. And then after that, they sent me to Yuma, Arizona. So basically, by the time I hit my 1 year mark in the Marine Corps, they sent me to Yuma, Arizona.
Okay.
And then I was there for like a year and a half. They sent me on a 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, which at first I went to Japan. I was in Okinawa, Japan for a few days, and afterwards I went to Iwakuni.
Expected.
I was there. Yeah, I was there for a little bit. I was attached to another unit.
Okay. And
then I came back to Okinawa because I was attached to another unit. So we don't have like our own unit is not deployed. We get attached to other units. We're like specialists on.
Your unit in your aircraft specialist technician unit is a specialist unit, so you get attached to other military units or other Marine units?
We're part of a logistics unit.
Okay.
Yeah, we're part of a logistics unit.
Okay.
And then what happens is, they say, okay, we need several people from all these different little shops that specialize in different parts of the aircraft. So for me, it was like most of the stuff that's on the cockpit, some of the stuff that's in the other parts of the airplane. So, if a pilot says, hey, like, this panel here wasn't working or something, or there's something wrong with it, or just if they need periodic maintenance,
was it a logistics unit that was attached to any military unit, or was it specific?
Yeah. So let me explain to you. So what happens is the squadrons that actually have the airplanes, they have their own technicians that actually work on the airplanes. I never actually really touched the airplanes. So they would go take the components out and say, hey, so we cannot fix this because it's too technical, it's too specialized. We need to send it to these guys, and they send it to us. And then from there, we find out, okay, hey, this is what the pilot reported, or this is what the technician reported. All right, let's figure it out, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. Once it's done, we send it to the supply office, and then, and then from there, it goes on our aircraft at some point.
It's really interesting. It's a very flexible system compared to how people view it, because logistics is especially important. And that's also what Petty Officer Camacho did. Generally,
he did something very similar. Yes, he did something very similar. So then they sent me to Japan, and then afterwards I went on a ship for a month and a half, which really wasn't very much time. But we're part of Cobra Gold, which is a military exercise they have with the Thai military. We were there for a little bit, and then came back to Japan. I spent another 5 months there. Came back to Arizona. I just continued to do my job for a little bit, and then on January I was sent to Quantico, Virginia, for the Marine Security Guard training. So what that entails...
did you choose that?
Yes, I chose that. So,
okay.
Not everybody's eligible to go. You have to follow certain criteria, so you can't be married, can't have kids, you have to have a good record, you have to prove that, you're a sound individual. Technically the top 10% of the Marine Corps goes there. I mean, I want to be honest, I was not part of that group at all, but I just qualified enough to go in there.
Yeah.
And then, so the job of a Marine security guard is, not like how they portray us in the movies, that we're just standing at attention and we're, all over the embassy and stuff. It's not like that. So what we do is we provide security for the embassy. We protect classified material of the embassy, because every embassy has it, basically. And, we're there to ensure the safety of all the mission personnel.
Yeah.
And we get posted all over the place. So we can get posted not just embassies, but consulates as well. And, we can be in there was no specific spot, where, if I could request something, but they could send me anywhere. They could send me to Colombia, they could send me to Saudi Arabia, they could send me to Mongolia, they could send me anywhere. Right? And I'm there for what should be an entire year. My story is a little bit different, but, we're there for normally an entire year, and then we get rotated somewhere else. And then once, those duties for 3 years, normally.
Yeah.
And then once you're done with that, you go back to the fleet, which is, where you did your normal job before.
Yeah.
And if you decide to stay in, you can stay in. If you don't decide to stay in, which I didn't, then you get rotated out.
So it was like in a contract basis. You were being a security guard for like 3 years.
Yeah.
And then you decide, and then when the terms expired, you decided.
So how it worked is I had a 5.5 year contract. No, I'm sorry, I had a 5-year contract when I first joined. And, I was already in for 3.5 years. So, the security guard is for 3 years. So I had to extend for another 1.5 years.
Okay, it makes sense.
And, they asked me, so do you want to re-enlist? And that's when I was like, we'll see. And I did my security guard duty, and I said, no, I'm not going to re-enlist. I was asked many times. I was even asked to extend for another 6 months to a year in the security program, but for personal reasons, I decided not to.
Yeah.
And so I was posted first in the Republic of Congo. So we were actually the first detachment. That's what it's called when we're in an embassy or a consulate. We're a detachment of Marines. We're a brand new detachment. 3 of us were brand new from the school, from the training. And we were the first Marines in that country in, over 10 years, because there was a civil war that happened in 97.
First Marines or just first general U.S. military personnel?
Marine security guards.
Okay.
Because they had an embassy there, but, especially after Benghazi, they needed to expand their, the amount of...
of course, Benghazi.
Yeah, Benghazi, So we were the first Marines to be there. We stood up that detachment, started everything from scratch. I had to learn, very, very quickly on how to do everything, because not only am I a security guard, but we also have different duties within that job. So, for example, my duty was, apart from being a security guard, was I had to get food for all the Marines, because we lived off compound. Even if we live on compound, we still have to have food. I had to get a cook. For us, we had to work with HR and contract, submitting a contract form, stuff like that. Very in-depth. I'm not going to get into specifics, but
yeah, of course.
So yeah, my first post was in the Republic of Congo, which was really interesting. And then I was rotated out early because three of us were on the same rotation cycle, and they couldn't have they couldn't have everybody leave at the same time because it's for 1 year. So they said, hey, look, you're one of the new guys, so you have to go. So after about 8 months, they sent me to Malta, little island in the Mediterranean, which was probably my favorite place to be.
Yeah, I saw a lot of your Facebook posts around there. You seem to enjoy it.
I loved it there. So I was there for actually 7 months. The headquarters in Frankfurt, they wanted me to leave earlier, and I asked why, because even my detachment commander kind of fought for me to stay in. And they said, look, it's just because we want to get his rotation cycle kind of back in sync, and it is what it is. Look, he has to go somewhere. I ended up going to New Delhi, India afterwards. I was there for 11 months, and then after that, they sent me to Croatia. And Croatia was another really good spot. India was really interesting as well. And then, I had the option to extend for another 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
But I said no thanks, personal reasons, I appreciate the offer, but, so I went back to, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for about almost a month, give or take. Yeah, like 3 weeks to a month. I was there for final processing, medical examinations, making sure that, I get my benefits and all this other stuff. And then, after that was over, they said, okay, you can go on what's called terminal leave, which terminal leave means that all the leave that I have saved up, I had about a month saved up. So they let me leave early. My original end of service date was on March 16th. Okay. I got out February 14th.
Oh, okay.
So I got out a month early. And yeah, after that, I went back home. I was technically still under contract, but I didn't have to go back. I didn't have to report to anybody. And then on March 16th, it's like originally, it was like, okay, bye. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You're not the only military personnel. I'm trying to get a lot, since this channel has a lot to do with military history. I'm trying to get, I think, the best sources you can find on the military aren't from the academics. It's more to do with people on the ground. Yeah, I actually have a Norwegian, my friend from university. He was a sergeant in the Norwegian army, and he was in the mechanized infantry and specialized in winter warfare. I'm trying to pick different niches. And I know that you said that, for example, you don't have counter-insurgency training or that you have combat experience, but I still find that very interesting, your whole security, because I think that does have a bit to do with counterinsurgency, especially with Benghazi, that you have to organize.
Counterinsurgency, not so much, because we do get briefs on terrorism in the area, but the thing with Marine security guards is we're not allowed to shoot anywhere outside the gates. Anything outside the gates is that country's problem. Under the Vienna Convention, something is happening outside the gates, the host country is the one that's responsible for taking care of it. So, if there's a building that's right next to us, and we're getting shot at from that building, but it's across the way, it's across the street, in foreign territory, we can't shoot at that area. We have to call the cops or call the military of that country, and they go take care of it, not us.
That's
so, you don't really get that kind of,
That's a very tricky situation, especially... Were you in the Democratic Republic of Congo?
I was there for a couple days.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that country is very volatile, especially the civil war that happened about 15 years ago.
Yeah, they have shit going on all the time.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. So since you haven't, can you run me through the general tactics? Does the Marine Corps have general tactics on how to counter conventional and non-conventional forces? For example, I saw a video on YouTube of a guy who made a video on I think it's called an L-shaped ambush, where the most efficient way to ambush a unit coming through, like this is a road and the unit's coming up through the road, is to line up your forces alongside them parallel, and then line up forces on top blocking the unit. So I guess you can leave a little escape path so that you can push the unit to the right. Do you have things like that you're taught in the Marine Corps?
Yes, but that's mainly something you would ask an infantry guy. I was not infantry, so
okay.
Those kinds of specifics. I'm not. I'm sorry, I just can't really answer because I don't.
No, it's fine.
Really the big thing with counterinsurgency is a lot of it really is just because, as a Marine or, whatever, you have to get the local military, the police, you have to get them to help you, because you don't know the language, you're a different color, different culture, religion, stuff like that. It's, especially, insurgency warfare. I mean, that's really won by the people of that country, not by foreigners.
Yeah. No, that's the impression that I get, that, for example, in Afghanistan, a lot of the counterinsurgency measures are done by the Afghan security forces, and it seems like coalition forces and NATO forces are sort of more tied down, like you said, with your example of the embassy, that if someone's shooting at you from outside of the gate, you can't respond. And I feel like the U.S. military and other foreign militaries in Afghanistan are tied down by that sort of protocol.
Yeah, actually, a video just came out about that, about some Air Force captain that was talking about the rules of engagement, saying how they really restrict the military on that aspect. A lot of it really has also been trial and error, with the way they do counterinsurgency operations. I had some of my friends who were infantry. They told me that they would go to a village. They would try to, they had to talk to the village chief, the village elders. They had to, sit down and talk with everybody. They, had their interpreter with them, and they would have to get the local police and military involved and really have them do most of it. But especially in the case of Afghanistan, I mean, they're really trying to train them so the U.S. and coalition forces can pull out because of,
Yeah. And
that's something that has to be done by them, not by the coalition forces.
No, definitely. So how do you see the situation in Afghanistan? Where do you see the future in that? Do you think we're going to have a permanent presence of NATO forces and U.S. forces in Afghanistan? And if not, like, what do you think is going to happen?
I'm going to be completely blunt. I think that Afghanistan's going to fall. Unfortunately, if you look at documentaries like "This Is What Winning Looks Like" on Vice, you should link it down in your description.
Yeah.
With the corruption, corruption in every aspect, everything from. Hold on a second. Can you wait? No. Okay, my girlfriend's about to make herself a smoothie real quick.
That's fine. It's fine. Maybe I should put that in the interview as well. add a bit of a more organic.
Yeah.
Vibe.
So if you look at that documentary, and it's a couple years old, but it's something that it still resonates today. It's the fact that without a real understanding of how the culture works, because we could say that, oh, we want to establish a democracy, we want to do this, we want to give all these rights to women, but the problem is every culture is different.
Yeah.
The way we look at things is different. So, for example, let's just say in simple terms, right? Let's just say I grew up in a very liberal household, and my definition of freedom is I can go out as late as I want. I can have my girlfriend sleep in the same room with me, in the same bed, and basically I have to do what I want, right? You grew up in a very religious household, in which your definition of freedom may be, I have to tell my parents where I'm going, I come back at, before nightfall, I have to ask my parents' permission to have my girlfriend over, even at your age, and the door has to be open.
Yeah.
And basically you have to swear that you're not going to do anything, right?
No, definitely, I completely understand.
So for example, like also, if you go to a lot of these countries, like the closest I've ever been to Afghanistan, like on in land-wise, is India, and even there I saw that people are very different. The definition of freedom is very different. It's the mentality. If for us to say that, oh yes, we want to be like Americans, that's completely idiotic in my opinion. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, and we have to understand that the way that they do things is very different.
Yeah.
In many ways, how they think to us is unacceptable. For example, they have, the way they think about women is very different. The way they think about even little boys, they have an ancient practice called bashabazi, which is boy play. And if you ever see the movie The Kite Runner, and even if you see the documentary that I was telling you about, they have a lot of the police chiefs have little child sex slaves. You know, that's a very common practice. It's not really seen as a big deal. Actually,
is that in India as well?
I'm sorry?
Is that in India as well? Are you specifically talking about?
No, really. Maybe I can't really, you know, speak from experience that I saw anything. I mean, maybe way up north in like Kashmir, but I'm not completely sure. I don't want to insult anybody, you know, anybody who might look at this. So I'm not going to say that it was or wasn't. But I know things like Afghanistan, like I think Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, like those countries, that's a very, very widely practiced thing. You know, so things like that.
Did you experience that in, for example, things that are similar to that in like the Congo?
Not really. Not that I can recall. You know, but I had you know, I knew people that, you know, they saw that in Afghanistan. They saw that, you know, little boys were kind of used in that manner, and that, you know, women were, you know, really.
So you have eyewitness accounts through your associates in military. That's interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, like I said, for us to say that, oh, you know, they should be like, it's not going to work that way. Yeah. Not only that, you know, you have to understand how like Afghanistan is. It's a very fragmented country. Not only that, but also, you know, the way that, if you look at history, you know, especially if you look at Africa, I mean, Africa is always falling apart in my opinion. And it's because, you know, the way that the borders are drawn up is by all the you know, European powers.
Yeah.
So think of it like this. So imagine like L.A. or Chicago, which has a lot of gang problems, right? And it's like, imagine if the police came and put out a gate on whatever neighborhoods that they wanted to control, right? Although, like, let's just say, you know, and a lot of the gangs, rival gangs, ended up in the same circle.
Yeah.
Right. So now you got all this infighting. And that's the same thing that's going on in Africa and Afghanistan and places like that.
A lot of different ethnicities. You have the Pashtuns, the Baluchistan,
you got the Hazaras, you got all these people.
We got very artificial countries.
Right. So, you know, that's another big issue. And then also it's just the fact that, you know, a lot of them just have a very different mentality. And you know, with you know, especially now like ISIS, they have a lot of influence, because the other thing is, like if you look at it in the case of Iraq, you know, corrupt, oppressive people that we support, by the way, they're making things hard for a certain group of people. Like, for example, if you look at the case of Iraq, like the Shias were being marginalized, right? I mean, I'm sorry, the Sunnis were being marginalized. So they looked at ISIS as like their salvation.
Yeah.
Now, in places like Afghanistan, it's just the fact that a lot of the police and military, I mean, they're first of all, they're super big on drugs. I mean, a lot of those guys are stoned all the time. I mean, I've heard so many stories of, you know, they searched one of the A&A soldiers and they found heroin on him. You know, that's, I mean, you can't fight like that. And then,
I mean, there's a famous video of an A&A soldier fighting along British forces on YouTube.
Yeah,
and he's like smoking, and like a bullet almost shoots him, and he's like
shooting crazy. Yeah, I've seen that. You know, and things like that. And then, you know, it's just the fact that, you know, and you can see this also in many countries. Like, none of the politicians really work to make their country better. They just want to get as much money as possible.
Yeah.
And the rest, you know, the rest is for the project, but, you know, a lot of it never really gets done.
Yeah, definitely.
And, you know, you can look up a lot on the subject. I mean, it's just, nothing really gets done, but people are still, you know, suffering. And I think, once the U.S. pulls out of Afghanistan completely, we're probably going to have to find our way back in there, because it's going to get so shitty. You know, just like Iraq, really.
Yeah, definitely. No, and especially as for security forces such as yourself, things like Islamic insurgency must resonate with your mind, especially with the thing in Benghazi. Have you ever had worries about something like that happening again in a jurisdiction you're in or thinking about going into? Like, let's say, for example, you would have been posted to like the Middle East as a Marine security guard. Would that run through your mind that a scenario like Benghazi could replay?
Well, you always have to think about that. You know, I mean, like,
I'm sure that doesn't run through your mind when you were in, for example, Croatia.
Actually, the funny thing is that, Croatia, had a war, in the 90s. And now with, things kind of destabilizing in many countries, you just always have to be ready for anything. I mean, especially, for example, when I was in Africa, the Congo was actually a pretty corrupt and repressive government.
Yeah.
Right? Many people say it. They don't say it publicly because they would be arrested for it. But, you just always have to be ready because, especially in countries like that, things change dramatically.
Yeah.
One day things could be hunky-dory, and then the next day, hey, there was a coup, and, now everything's uncertain. You got death squads, you got this, you got that. So you always have to think, even if you're, I say the land of unicorns, you can't let your guard down. You always have to be very mindful of what's going on. One thing I did a lot was I would look on the news, like, websites, and I would try to see anything that's going on in the country. So, for example, when I was in India, they have a very big problem with Pakistan.
Yeah.
And, just always, it's pretty bad.
Especially Muslim-Hindu relations are quite deteriorating.
Yeah.
Especially since Modi is quite, I feel, nationalistic in a religious sense that, India is Hindu. That's the impression I get from him.
Right. I mean, I don't know too much on that particular matter, but, especially when I was in India, I mean, it's closer to a lot of these dangers. Actually, I remember when I was getting a brief, they said that India has actually had I think among the highest number of IEDs. And, this isn't a lot of places, like, especially towards Bangladesh, but, it's a high threat area. It's always like, yeah, you're in a high threat zone right now. Obviously, I didn't see anything big, but, you just always gotta be ready for it. You never know what's gonna happen. And especially as a Marine security guard, they always say, like, yeah, you can go to the Bahamas on your first post, and then the next post you can go to Syria. I mean, there was not an embassy in Syria anymore, but, just to give you an idea of what's going on. Like, they used to talk about Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso, which is in Africa. And right now that country is, like, basically in a civil war.
Burkina Faso, I didn't catch up to that. I knew they had, like, a bit of about a few months ago they had, like, an insurgency or something in Mali or Chad, but I didn't realize Burkina Faso. It's just one of those countries, it's because it's landlocked.
It's landlocked, and also it's not a country you hear about. So, I mean, there's always stuff going on there. I actually had a colleague of mine, she was in Bamako, Mali, and she said that, while she was there was a coup.
In Mali?
In Mali, yeah. I had another friend, he was in Juba, South Sudan. And, there's a full-on civil war going on.
Yeah, so, it's close to a genocide.
Yeah.
In
you always
South
have to
Sudan.
be ready to go anywhere, and you always have to have the mindset of, doesn't matter where you're at, you always have to be ready. For example, here in Malta, like, Malta is a very safe place. I loved Malta. It was really nothing happened there, and, it was almost like, you almost got bored at times, but, it's, mind you, if you look at it on the map, here's Libya, here's Tunisia, or you look over there, it's Egypt. Libya is a failed state, and, it can easily spill over. Actually, I remember when that news that happened where the migrant ship capsized, that was right off the coast of Malta. So,
I mean,
while that may not affect us necessarily, you still always have to be, keeping the mindset of, hey, something can happen. So just
there are videos. For example, I think it's an average of like 4,000, 5,000 migrants die in the Mediterranean a year because ships capsize. And I've seen some of those videos, and like Italian Coast Guard will go on the coast of Sicily, and just like bodies will, pop up on the shore, and a lot of bodies. There was this video where it was, at least I counted, and there were like 30 people just washed up on the shore dead. Like, it's like, Jesus Christ. And it brings you images of the Middle Ages, of medieval times. It's very bleak.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because most people don't even know where Malta is, you know, especially most Americans. But I remember like that at that time, you know, really the light was shining on Malta because of all the stuff that was happening. And I actually remember one time we had a brief because there was ISIS graffiti. They found ISIS graffiti in some part of the island. And, you know, while that was not a big thing, you know, some kid could have just done it. I mean, but it just goes to show that, you know, things can happen. Actually, I remember a couple years ago there was a bombing right outside the embassy in Oslo.
Yeah.
So, and Norway, I mean, you don't ever hear about anything.
But that was that Christian fundamentalist, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's not like, you know, we're not just have our eyes on Islamic extremism. I mean, it's anything. You know, and I remember in you know, during the Cold War with in Greece, for example, you know, they targeted a bunch of U.S. personnel in that area.
No, it's definitely. So, if let's say you're in the embassy, let's say you're being attacked, and they do end up going inside the gate, because you told me you can't do anything if they're shooting from outside. If they end up going inside the gate, how would you react?
So, I'm not going to try to, you know, say too many details, but normally how it works is we try our best to, like, avoid confrontations. You know, if you look at, for example, what happened in 2004 in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, I actually knew the consul general. She was actually my ambassador in Malta. You know, she was there during that attack. You know, our big thing is just to protect everybody from the embassy, right? Whether it be a locally employed staff and, you know, Americans. We just try to lock down the embassy to not let anybody in or out. You know, if for example they feel like, hey, Marines need to go on the roof or somewhere else to engage the threat, they'll do it. That's generally relegated by the regional security office. They're part of the State Department. And then, you know, but usually by then the local police and military will come in. But our big focus is to not let anybody in, and, you know, just get everybody to a safe space. That's the main thing that'll happen in that situation. But, you know, like now, if our goal there is not to, you know, be kicking down doors for leadership style, but if we feel that our lives or the lives of somebody else is threatened, then we are allowed to engage. Even if they're outside of the gate? No. Okay. So that's very strict. Unless it's like extringent circumstances, like unless it's like we're literally allowed, like, hey, go and do your thing, then fine. But we're not allowed to set foot outside. Oh, okay. With your weapons? Anytime we were outside the gates, like, we had to take off our weapons. Like, we can't, unless if we were allowed to, like specifically allowed to, we're not allowed to do anything. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's very different how they portrayed in the movies. Yeah, in the movies they seem they have a lot more liberty. There's a movie with Samuel L. Jackson that No, that was a different scenario, but, you know, the thing you have to understand is that this is diplomacy. You know, it's a very different ballgame. This is diplomacy. They don't, you know, our best, the way we do things is we try to de-escalate the situation more than anything. You know, so a lot of times, we'll have protests outside, and we'll have, you know, we'll be ready, you know, in case of anything. We'll try to use whatever means to avoid avoid actually shooting at people. So, you know, whether it be tear gas or stuff like that. You know, if things start getting crazy, and like if you ever see the movie Argo, you know, things like that start happening. You know, like, you know, we'll call the police and military, like, hey, you know, you got to get these people out of here, because if they start coming in here and we feel like, you know, there's a threat. Obviously, you weren't alive during that time period. But how do you think that movie portrayed the response? It actually portrayed it pretty well. Yeah, you know, I don't know the specifics of every little detail that happened. I'm pretty sure that if something like that would have happened now, I mean, it would have probably gone a little bit differently, but, you know, like, that just really depends. I mean, now our embassies are very, like, kind of well fortified, so, you know, I think for a bunch of people trying to get in, it would be really, really, really hard. I mean, these things are like, embassy is basically like a fortress.
I passed by the one in Berlin, and it's like a gray concrete building. It's like
I haven't been inside, but I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, it'll be very hard to get it. But if something like that would have happened, Benghazi, I guess, is a poor example because that was a different story. But it'd be very tough to get it.
I've never worked for governments per se, except the U.S. government. I did an internship, but I did sort of. I led the largest student society for Israel in the whole UK, and that sort of entailed political campaigning and obviously, dealing with the Israeli government, since they were trying to improve the image of the state of Israel, so to speak. Even though we were for the two-state solution, not necessarily in agreement with everything the government does, we still coordinated a lot with them. And whenever I passed by the embassy, there were like 2 police officers with machine guns. And to see a police officer with a gun in the UK, it matters because the vast majority don't only carry batons. So when you see a police officer with a machine gun, it's important. And I'd always come and I'd be like, hey, and like the embassy. But the embassy itself, the gate, the perimeter, wasn't really that. Well, I mean, it's London. You don't have to have it too well guarded. But for example, they had the car stoppers to avoid like suicide bombing or something like that from the outside, and you had the 2 police always on guard there. So that was very interesting. So a final question before I guess we conclude, since I told you I guess we couldn't really delve into counterinsurgency too much, but I think this is very important because this has to do with it, since it's security, especially in the diplomatic sphere. Since you were an aircraft technician, where do you see the future of air power?
It's always going to be there. Especially since it became a thing during World War I. I mean, aircraft, whether manned or unmanned, are always going to have to be there.
But like in the aspect of drones, in the aspect of, for example, I think they were trying to like start up a space agency for like people were joking like space marines. I'm not too sure about that, but like where do you see the
well, it's something that it's always going to be evolving. They're always going to come out with new technology that and, that like new threats come up and new technology needs to counter it. So do you see like UAVs and stuff being a really big thing, but you're always going to need the fighter jets. You're always going to need bombers.
So you're always going to need the human element.
You're always going to need the human element. That's fundamental.
Okay. No, that's definitely interesting. Well, anyway, man, thank you very much for your time. I'm gonna post this, see how people like it. I'm sure they'll enjoy it. It's quite long, but there have been interviews that have been like hour long, so it's nothing too bad. And hopefully I'll definitely do a follow-up interview in a few months. See what questions people want to ask you. For anybody watching this, just post a comment if you want him to answer specific questions. Obviously, because of the nature of his job, he can't answer everything to too great detail, as I noticed, because I was trying to fish for questions, but I completely understand. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everyone for viewing. If you like this video, please comment, like, share, subscribe, all the list of everything to do, and we'll see you guys next time.
Sure, thank you.
Bye.